Today, we will be sharing an update on the current wildfire situation and drought which continues to impact people and communities across BC. Before we get started today, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the tragic passing of Devin Gale, the 19-year-old BC Wildfire Service firefighter who lost her life bravely battling wildfires on the line of duty last Thursday near Revelstoke. On behalf of all British Columbians, we extend our deepest and heartfelt condolences to her family, her friends, and her colleagues. Every day during wildfire season, our firefighting crews go to heroic lengths, just like Devin did, to keep people and communities in BC safe. We thank Devin for her service and thank all of those courageous firefighters who serve and protect British Columbia. Given the persistent and challenging wildfire season and drought conditions that we are seeing, we are aiming to move to a cadence of weekly media availabilities to provide updates and respond to questions. Often, we will even provide multiple updates a week. Some of these media availabilities will be with me and with other ministers, and some will be led by our dedicated officials from the BC Wildfire Service, the River Forecast Centre, the Ministry of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, and other agencies and ministries as needed. Our priority is providing British Columbians with the information that they need to be prepared and to stay safe. Now on to our update. There are currently 391 active wildfires burning in our province, over half of which remain out of control. Since April 1st, 2023, 1,183 wildfires have burned a total of 1.39 million hectares. As winds shift today, smoke and cloud cover will clear. These clear skies will increase temperatures, lower humidity, and increase wildfire activity on many of our current wildfires. Approximately 150 people are under an evacuation order due to wildfires, and approximately 3,400 people are under an evacuation alert in the northwest, northeast, and Cariboo regions of the province. We also know that people of Akam First Nations were evacuated yesterday due to the St. Mary's wildfire, and homes and other buildings were lost. This is a tragic situation, and I am thinking of the people of Akam First Nation. I want to assure everyone that my ministry is working around the clock to support people and communities facing evacuations. This past Friday, the federal government responded to our request for additional resources given the extreme wildfire activity in BC, which is expected to persist. We are grateful to our federal colleagues for their approval of BC's request for additional resources to support our wildfire response efforts. Our firefighting crews and emergency management personnel have done an incredible job keeping people safe, and I want to recognize the BC Wildfire Service and emergency management teams who are working around the clock to respond to fires, support communities, and share up-to-date information with the public. We know that the road ahead of us is long, complex, and challenging. That's why last week, I made a request to Federal Minister Bill Blair for federal assistance to support our response to the wildfires across BC, and I'm thankful to the federal government for quickly approving our request and deploying Canadian Armed Forces and the Canadian Coast Guard to aid in suppressing fires. Canadian Armed Forces arrived in BC on Sunday to begin assessments and coordination of resources. The Canadian Armed Forces will be directly involved with fighting fires, and the Canadian Coast Guard will support the management, operations, and administrative activities of the BC Wildfire Service's incident command posts. Both will provide resources, such as helicopters, for mobility and logistical tasks, such as evacuation of isolated communities. Plans are underway to deploy the first company of soldiers from the Canadian Forces base in Edmonton to the Burns Lake area in the Northwest Fire Centre and to Vanderhoof at the Prince George Fire Centre. Additionally, there are currently international teams from the US, Mexico, New Zealand, in BC assisting with wildfire response, in addition to teams from Australia that arrived this past weekend. BC continues to coordinate additional out-of-province resources through the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre. But everyone has a part to play in wildfire preparedness and safety. I want to thank British Columbians for their incredible diligence over the last week. Of the 235 wildfire starts in the last 7 days, only 13 have been human-caused. Please keep up the good work and remain cautious with any activity that could lead to a wildfire. Our BC Wildfire Service team is busy fighting lightning-caused wildfires, and they need our support. You can also report a wildfire using the app or by calling *5555 from a cell phone. Quick reporting by people has already been a big help to wildfire crews this season. If your community is placed under an evacuation order, you must evacuate the area immediately. Your local authority or First Nation will provide information on evacuation routes and evacuation reception centers. Emergency support services are readily available to lend a helping hand to those who have been evacuated and who need assistance. People must register and attend an evacuation reception center to access these services, which encompass everything from providing food, accommodation, transportation, to taking care of other essential needs that you may have. It is now possible for people right across the province to pre-register with emergency support services online using the evacuee registration and assistance tool. And I encourage everyone, especially those living near wildfires, to register today at ess.gov.bc.ca. In addition to wildfires, many of our province are being affected by severe drought. We are experiencing a serious drought which may worsen into the fall and summer, or even into the next year. We are working across ministries to ensure that we are using all levers available to us to reduce water consumption, and this includes implementing water conservation measures throughout all BC government facilities. The province has also been working with communities on their water scarcity response planning for many months and is ready to support further planning efforts throughout the drought season. We are calling on everyone in BC, including residential and industrial water users, to reduce their water usage. Everyone needs to do their part. The province is working with larger water users in sensitive areas to achieve voluntary reductions. We are actively monitoring conditions and in some cases will impose restrictions if voluntary measures do not prove to be enough. We all have a part to play to build a more resilient province, and at this time, I'm urging all people and businesses to conserve water. Follow all water restrictions locally. Water your lawn sparingly, if at all. Consider taking shorter showers. Turn off the tap while brushing your teeth or shaving. Only do full loads of dishes and laundry. Let's commit together to being mindful of our water use. I've heard some great ideas for small actions that together can make a big difference. For example, if you've boiled water as part of your food preparation, wait for it to cool down and water your plants with it instead of pouring it down the drain. I hear that's actually very nutritious for the plants as well. While you're waiting for your tap water to heat up to do the dishes, fill a jug with water for your fridge. These actions do make a difference when we all do them. And I want to thank leaders at the local level who have encouraged the conservation of water. By working together, we can get through this drought. I'm now going to turn it over to Minister Pam Alexis for a few words on how we're helping farmers and ranchers during this challenging time.
Thank you, Bowinn. This is indeed a very serious time for BC's agricultural community who are being impacted by both drought and wildfires. I've been on the phone daily with farmers and ranchers, as well as mayors and local governments listening intently to their concerns. And we're looking at short-term, medium-term, and long-term solutions. I want to acknowledge the collaboration between staff in my ministry, farmers and ranchers, and the two industry associations most affected at this time, the BC Cattlemen's Association and BC Dairy. In times like these, it's important that everyone works together for the common good. We know there is a need for hay and grain to feed animals. Many of our small-scale farmers are wrestling with hard business decisions that may see them have to sell some of their cattle in the days and weeks ahead. I also know how resilient they are, and we will do everything we can, along with our partners, to help them through this. I can assure you we are taking this very seriously, and all options are on the table. We are working closely with BC Cattlemen and BC Dairy so we can try and identify more sources of feed for producers. This is a complicated issue, and we will keep working together on solutions. I want to stress that I'm here, and ministry staff are here to do everything we can to support those that need help. I chose not to attend the annual meeting of federal, provincial, and territorial agricultural ministers this week because my focus is on supporting our agricultural sector, and I felt the need and responsibility to be here. But I've had discussions with my federal colleague, Minister Bowinn, and have made it crystal clear we need their support. I'm pleased to say we have received approval for late participation in the Agri-Stability Program, so anyone who didn't enroll before the April 30th deadline will be able to do so and get the assistance they need. The interim payment limit has also been increased from 50% to 75%, and advance payments can be obtained in 10 business days. We've also submitted an application to the federal government for an agri-recovery program, which will help impacted farms recover and get back into production. It's also important to know that a state of emergency does not need to be declared for farmers to access these programs or any other financial assistance programs. As I mentioned earlier, we all should be working together, and it's important that we're sharing the right facts. If anyone has a question about available supports or if they need direct ministry assistance, it's important that they call or email AgriService BC. And I'm just going to read out that number one more time. 1-888-221-7141. Our staff can help producers access programs that will support them during this challenging time. And staff can even provide a specialized assistance depending on someone's unique circumstances. For example, we have regional agrologists who can support at a local level. Finally, I want to reiterate my personal concern for our producers. This is not an easy time to be a farmer. With fires, floods, drought, extreme heat and extreme cold, animal diseases, and a pandemic, all within the last 3 years. Their well-being is a priority to me, and if anyone is in need of mental health supports, please let us know. We've recently provided $750,000 to AgriSafe BC for additional supports, and we can direct folks to the appropriate resources online or by phone. I know this is an emotional and hard time for our farmers, and I'm so glad we have great industry partners to work with. As summer goes on, this isn't going to get any easier, but I promise we will be with the agriculture community every step of the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Alexis. To wrap up, I want to acknowledge that we are seeing more climate events, major fires, and droughts. This is an extremely challenging time for many people and our communities. It is immensely worrying living day to day with smoke or being a fire or being on an evacuation alert or order. Thank you to all of the members of the public who have been helping, whether it's by calling in a fire at *5555, by having an emergency bag ready to go, or having a plan to support family or neighbors who may need assistance in an emergency. And on behalf of everyone in BC, thank you to the firefighters, first responders, local and provincial emergency management teams who are working tirelessly to prepare for and respond to these challenges. I want to assure you that we are working hard to ensure communities are prepared and have the supports they need in the event of a wildfire or other climate-related emergency. Our number one focus is on keeping people safe. So let's continue to be calm, to be safe, and to be prepared. Thank you. I'm now joined by Cliff Chapman, Director of Provincial Operations for the BC Wildfire Service, Peter Brock, Executive Director, Regional Operations for the Ministry of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, Dave Campbell, Head of the River Forecast Center, Cliff Chapman, Acting Director of the Water Management Branch with the Ministry of Forests, also from the River Forecast Center, and Mark Raymond, Executive Director of Agricultural Resources Division. We're happy to take your questions now.
As a reminder for reporters on the phone, please press *1 to enter the queue. That's *1 to ask a question. For media in the room, please line up at the microphone provided, and please make sure to provide your full name and outlet. We'll be starting in the room today. Media will be limited to one question and one follow-up. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Minister St. John with CTV News. I think we'll start with the drought. That was the last thing we spoke of. And I think, Minister, you talked about it quite well about how, if you give us an idea how widespread it is, where it's most impacting what part of the province. And you have gone into some detail about how can the province actually help these farmers directly. And Minister, you mentioned last week you want people to conserve your time again. Any indication that you're actually listening to you and conserve?
Why don't I'll start and I'll pass it on to Minister Alexis here. The drought condition is very widespread across the province. 2/3 of the province is currently in a level 4 or level 5 drought condition, with level 5 being the most severe. We're seeing level 5 conditions in the northeast and also on the Vancouver Island. I'll be able to turn it over to Dave Campbell with the River Forecast Center to provide a few more details on that after Minister Alexis speaks as well. I'm very grateful to the local leaders who have been calling for water conservation. We have seen an uptick in local leaders urging their communities to follow restrictions and reduce water consumption. I understand that the city of Kamloops, their drought response team was meeting yesterday to discuss watering restrictions. Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen recently issued additional water restrictions. I've seen calls from Tofino for greater awareness and water restriction. I think these are good signs that local governments are taking the situation seriously, and I hope that that will continue. Minister Alexis?
Thank you, Minister Ma. As far as impacts to farmers and drought conditions, that's why we've initiated the Agri-Recovery Program, which after the event will help rebuild and bring next year crops that perhaps are more hardy and able to handle the drought conditions. So we're working on that. Thank you.
And Dave Campbell, the areas of concern.
Yeah, we're seeing, in terms of the drought side of things, another week of warm weather since our update last week. Thunder showers, which did provide a little bit of rainfall, particularly through the South Interior and the Upper Columbia region. But generally, we've seen ongoing deterioration of stream flow. We're seeing particularly in areas in the North Interior, areas around Prince George, and into the Omanika that have really declined in terms of river flows over the past week. Provincial Technical Drought Working Group is gathering information at this point and looking to have an update on those drought codes that will come out later this week on Thursday morning. And really not expecting to see significant changes other than the potential increase in drought levels in some parts, particularly in that north. So continuing to see challenges very much broad spread across the province.
And did you have a follow-up?
I do. I do. Thank you so much. I do. Thank you so much. I don't know if you do modeling of what the wildfires are showing you this year, but is there any modeling, any indication of how significant this is going to get this year? We've already seen records, of course, broken. And then, I don't know who would answer this one, but in terms of the new resources, where would they most likely be deployed?
So in terms of the new resources, that was your second question? Way to jam a lot of questions in there, by the way. We're very thankful to the federal government for moving very quickly to approve our request for support. We're anticipating 75 soldiers to come into Vanderhoof today, with an additional 75 soldiers deployed to Burns Lake tomorrow. 2 helicopters arriving today and tomorrow as well. I'll turn it over to Cliff Chapman to speak to a little bit about their forecasting for the wildfire season. Thank you.
Before I answer the question today, and I never thought I'd have to do this in my career, I just want to echo and thank Minister Ma for her kind words about Devon Gale and the Gale family. BC Wildfire Service is a very tight-knit community. In my 22-year career, we have never had a firefighter fatality. It is impacting our organization greatly. Devon Gale was a member of that family, and tragically last Thursday lost her life trying to protect this province from wildfire. She will forever be remembered by the BC Wildfire Service. And we thank everybody out there who's been pouring in condolences to BC Wildfire and the family of Devon Gale. And please keep her in your hearts, as she will forever be in ours. Thank you. In terms of your question, the models are they don't look great for the rest of the summer. I've spoken in previous media availabilities about July and August being our prime, kind of our core fire season. They are typically warmer and drier months. We do not see rainfall as we at times will see in May and June. And we already have, a significant amount of fire on the landscape. So in terms of the models, right now, Environment Canada is forecasting warmer than average conditions. So we're expecting to see hot, dry temperatures, and they're modeling that we'll see less precipitation. We did see a little bit of rain come through the province in the last 24 hours into some of the areas that desperately needed rain, not all of the areas, and not enough rain. So it will give us an opportunity with suppression efforts in the next 3-4 days. Unfortunately, behind this system that we saw come through yesterday is another high pressure ridge that's going to see hot and dry temperatures, in particular in the south. And it's not lost, I think, within BC that the primary area of our fires thus far has been in the north. And we're going to start to see that slowly shift, as we did with the fire yesterday in the Southeast Fire Center, which was primarily wind driven, but obviously a very challenging fire for the community and for our organization. I think I'll end it there. Thank you.
Next question is in the room as well. Please go ahead. Our next question is in the room as well. Please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Sophie Chamos from French BC. I would like to know, concerning the army, how long do we expect to have these soldiers deployed here in BC? And could you give me a word about, be more specific about the role of the Coast Guard, please? Is that the first time, for example, that the Coast Guard is helping us in this case?
Sure, thank you. Incredibly grateful to the federal government for moving so quickly on helping support the wildfire efforts here in BC. The Canadian Armed Forces will be directly involved with fighting fires, and the Canadian Coast Guard will support the management, operations, and administrative activities of the BC Wildfire Service's Incident Command Posts. In terms of the length of time that they will be here, I think this is something that we'll have to continue to work with the federal government on. For now, we're very, very grateful that they are being deployed today and tomorrow, with likely more in the way.
I do have a follow-up question about the smoke. We do know the last couple of days were pretty intense and hard for some regions. We learned yesterday also that investigation from the coroner service about the death of a young child. What kind of things can we do when we are exposed to a long time of when we are exposed about smoke for a long period of time? Could we have do you have more precise advice? So it's not just a few days, but a long period of happiness.
First, I want to acknowledge what a terrible tragedy the loss of that boy was for the family. I can't imagine a worse situation for a family to go through. And I know that all of our hearts go out to the family and everyone who knew the young man. It absolutely is a reminder that wildfire smoke can present health and safety risks, particularly for those who are very vulnerable. And in some cases, that risk is extreme, depending on the vulnerability. To your question about how people can protect themselves from smoke by staying indoors, by keeping their windows closed, using air cleaners with high efficiency particulate filtration, and visiting places with controlled air supply as well. So for within homes, that means having a HEPA filter in a part of your home, in a part of your home where you are able to go to for clean air. It means wearing an N95 mask when you are outdoors and limiting your exposure outdoors, avoiding exercising outdoors and exercising indoors only. It also means finding out where clean air spaces are in your communities. My ministry, Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, we are prepared to work with communities, and we encourage communities to reach out to us for support in providing clean air spaces. So that means if they want to extend the hours of a community center that has good quality HVAC or any facility, really. We're encouraging communities to connect with us. We can provide financial supports to support the incremental opening of these facilities for community members to be in there and have a safe place to stay for a long time. That probably wasn't as articulate as I hoped, but I hope the message is across. Thanks.
For our next question, we're staying in the room. Please go ahead.
Hello, Joel Ballard, CBC. I have a couple questions specific to the St. Mary's River fire that's going up near Cranbrook. Can you give us a sense of what resources are being deployed there right now, either you or the BC Wildfire Service?
Sure, thank you. And I do want to acknowledge the tactical evacuation of the Acom First Nation that had to occur as a result of this fire. I will pass it on to Cliff Chapman to speak to more about the BC Wildfire Service resources deployed there.
For the community, and as Minister Ma said, our hearts go out to that community that really saw an aggressive wind-driven wildfire. The conditions in the southeast currently are not as aggressive or as dangerous as they are in the north, but when you see 60 to 80 kilometer winds, it just shows how really receptive the fuels are to lightning caused wildfires at this moment. And if they get hit by wind like that, unfortunately, we see fires like we saw yesterday. And again, the community is working with us, and we're working with them to try to get them home as quickly as we can. In terms of resources, we had air tankers on those fires last night. Unfortunately, with the challenging weather conditions, it was a bit tricky with our aviation assets. We did get heavy equipment onto that fire last night to start to build guard around it, which we've seen great success with this morning. And we have upwards of 50 wildfire personnel either on or deploying to that incident, as well as additional aviation assets through the day.
Okay, and staying on that fire, we've seen about 50 properties evacuated. Can either of you reiterate the type of support that's available to them right now?
So we work closely with communities to provide emergency support services. I actually just got off the phone with Chief Joe Pierre Jr. to connect with him to ensure that they have all the immediate supports that they require. The community is currently, I assume you're referring to Acom First Nation. Acom First Nation, the community is currently in the process of assessing their medium-term and long-term needs, and we'll be working with them on those.
Next question, we're going to head to the phones. Our first question on the phones is from Richard Zussman, Global News. Please go ahead.
I think this is for Cliff, and first off, Cliff, my condolences to you and the entire firefighting community. In terms of the fire we see in the Cranbrook region, how challenging is it for firefighting crews with now large fires being spread out in more regions of the province? What does that mean for our resources in terms of allocating specific resources to specific areas of the province?
Sorry, I only caught the front end of your question. Can I have you repeat it, please?
difficulty hearing the phone line, so if you could just give us a moment, please.
Richard, could you repeat that question one more time, please? Apologies.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, my condolences, Cliff, to you and the firefighting community. On the firefights with this large fire in the Cranbrook area, and concern obviously in so many pockets of the province, how challenging is it as resources get spread out into different areas of BC to keep up? Does that add an additional element to make this particularly difficult?
I appreciate the condolences and thank you for the question. You know, I guess the short answer is yes, it makes it a little bit more challenging, but I think it's important to recognize BC Wildfire Service is a provincial organization. We operate provincially. We coordinate all of our resources out of our provincial wildfire coordination center, and we plan for just exactly what you're speaking to, which is hazard spread out across the province, potentially having large fires across the province. And we move resources around from all over the province. And obviously in a year like this, we have resources coming from all over the world. And we target those into those areas where we may have a high hazard and potential for new starts. And obviously we send them to existing fires that we, as we know, we have in the northern part of the province right now, significant amount of fires up there. So it adds a little element of challenge, but that's where we start to beef up our logistics team to make sure that we have our assets moving in a safe manner to where they're most needed.
Richard, did you have a follow-up?
In terms of how we are progressing, we got the updates on drought, fire last week. I know you spoke to the current situation. Are we in a worse place now than we were a week ago, a better place than we were a week ago? Is there any way to measure that sort of risk compared to where we were a week ago?
I'm going to check to see if Cliff or Dave are ready to provide comment on that, but I'll also note that I believe we have a technical presentation planned for Thursday, providing some more detailed updates then as well. But Cliff or Dave, do you have any comments for now?
You know, it is difficult to put is it worse or better than it was a week ago? What I will say, and I think it's important to recognize, is that with the amount of lightning we saw in this province over the course of the last 10 days, coupled with the drought that we are experiencing, we have high potential for holdover fires. And what that means is fires where a lightning struck, it might have come with some rain, and then it just sits there dormant. And there's no way to detect it until it starts to get hot and dry again. And right now, that is the forecast for the next few days and potentially the rest of the summer, is to see that hot and dry pattern we often see in July and August in British Columbia. So we are preparing for those holdover fires, but I suspect at times when we see a little bit of rain come into the province, it feels like we're going to get a break, and that's not always the case. And we are planning that this is a good opportunity to provide suppression and have success with our suppression tactics, but recognizing that in the days and weeks to come that we may see, you know, a significant amount of fires on the landscape once again, and perhaps even further south than we've seen to date.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, just continuing to comment on the drought side of things. So we're seeing a couple of factors at play. We continue to see the ongoing decline in river flows, and from that metric, as we go through the summer, and as Cliff has alluded to, we're very much into that July, August dry period. So we're not expecting to really see seasonally a lot of rainfall. And so we'll continue to see the progression of lower flows as we go through. The forecast for the coming week is continuing to be that hot and dry. So we're not expecting to see a huge relief in the short term. And we look at a number of the key metrics that we look at for drought, things like the stream flow. We're seeing an increased number of record low flows on increasing numbers of rivers that are gauged. So certainly on the drought side, we're continuing to see that onward deterioration, decline in conditions.
I do also want to acknowledge that with 1.39 million hectares burned as of today's update, 9 million hectares burned as of today's update, we have, we're heading into the peak season for wildfires. We have already exceeded the most hectares burned in the province due to wildfire for an entire year over the last 10 years. So it is significant, and there's likely more to come.
For our next question, we're going to Rob Shaw, Check News. Please go ahead.
Oh, hi there. I guess for the minister, but after the call to conserve water last week, I think a bunch of us got emails from people saying, why is our local municipality washing sidewalks? Why are they watering useless parcels of grass on boulevards, especially around Victoria and Vancouver, where the reservoirs are still in relatively good position for water? So I'm just wondering if you can speak to that. I know these are local decisions, but they undermine the message you gave again today for people to turn off the tap. And I think people struggle with that when they watch water being wasted in our urban centers. And does that concern you at all? And what do you say to that?
I do want to thank the local officials and local government leaders who have been repeating our call for people to conserve water. The voluntary reduction of conservation that every household, business, industry can engage in is incredibly important. I also do acknowledge that every community is different, where we're making clear and communicating what we at the provincial level are seeing in terms of drought conditions on the land base, and we're calling on communities to be proactive, which means they need to be updating their assessments and updating their projections, understanding where their reservoirs are and what they can expect in terms of draw. They need to escalate measures as required. And I know a lot of communities are doing that work right now. The province, we're going to be reaching out to communities to encourage them to continue these efforts. And we're also collecting data to allow us to have confidence that communities are on top of things. But reservoir levels for a lot of communities, they are in an okay place right now. But they also have to recognize that there are going to be extremely low recharge rates going forward, that the amount that their reservoirs are going to be refilled over the next several months will basically be next to nothing. They'll have to consider how much water evaporates from their reservoirs. They'll have to consider how much water they'll have to release in order to ensure that rivers and streams that are downstream of their reservoirs remain healthy. And they'll have to recognize and ensure that they understand the long-term consequences of drawing their reservoirs down. This is the work that we're calling on communities to do, and we're calling on communities to escalate those water conservation measures as appropriate.
Rob, did you have a follow-up?
Sure. Just to cram a couple questions into one here. For the Wildfire Service, could you comment on any shortage of equipment you might have? Like, we're sort of hearing lack of pumps and hoses and things like that that might be an issue, and to sort of what extent that is. And then for the agriculture staff, have you any update on where we can get feed? Like, it seems like an unsolvable issue in some way. Is there any lead on where that can come from? Is there any area you're focusing in Washington State, or is there any update on that?
All right, we'll go to Cliff Chapman of the Wildfire Service, and while he's responding to that question, we'll have Minister Alexis come to the podium.
We aren't the only jurisdiction that is seeing a significant wildfire season in Canada. Quebec, Alberta, Yukon, Northwest Territories, the list is kind of growing, and it gets added to seemingly as we enter into July and August. With that, we have had tremendous success working with CIFC, our Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center, at securing resources for the hazard and the potential of what's occurring in BC right now. Minister Ma spoke about the resources incoming, the military incoming. We were struggling to find aviation assets a couple of weeks ago. We have seen a great call to action from BC helicopter companies that have come and signed up with us to work. So we've seen a huge increase in our aviation fleet, upwards of 50 helicopters from where we were 3 weeks ago. In terms of your specific question around pumps and hose, it is a concern. We have enough currently, but we have asked for additional support should we have any that goes unserviceable or sometimes our pumps break down. So we're still trying to accumulate additional assets, knowing that we may see more fire on the landscape. But it is a slight challenge for us nationally and internationally to get those assets. Saying that, Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center has accepted our request for additional equipment, and ideally it will come in the next order in the coming days.
And I will address the question on hay, and just want to say that the relocation of animals due to forest fire, we have sufficient hay and feed for those animals at this moment, but we are looking at sourcing for to replenish winter stocks, which are being used right now by many of the producers. So we'll have more to say by the end of the week with respect to the options on the table, and I'll be able to answer your questions about sourcing and all of that at that time. Thank you.
For our next question, we're going to Brianna Charlebois from Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Great, thanks so much. Sorry if you're repeating yourself, but how many military members are we expecting in total? And I'm wondering if you have a breakdown of how many are actually going to be on the front lines versus mop-out.
The information I have right now is that we are expecting 75 soldiers to land in Vanderhoof today, 75 soldiers to be deployed to Burns Lake tomorrow. We've got 2 helicopters arriving today and tomorrow, and conversations continue with the federal government about additional resources.
And Brianna, did you have a follow-up?
Sure, yeah. I was told yesterday, unofficially, that they probably wouldn't be deployed to the front line. So I'm just sort of curious if you could tell me exactly what they will be doing on the front line. Thanks.
Well, I suppose I will say that we're very grateful to the federal government for the support that they are providing and for providing it so quickly upon our request. The support is substantial, it's robust, and it will give British Columbia the tools and personnel that it needs to keep people safe. The armed forces will be directly involved with fighting fires. The Canadian Coast Guard will support the management operations and administrative activities at the BC Wildfire Service's Incident Command Center. That is the information I have right now. Additionally, I understand both will be providing resources such as helicopters for mobility and logistical tasks, including supporting evacuations in isolated communities. More details will become available as the coordination progresses, though.
Our next question is for Lisa Yuzda, City News. Please go ahead.
This is for the Agricultural Minister. Last week we heard that food sources were going to start being challenged by the drought. I'm wondering if you can update on that situation and what is at most risk of suffering, food that will end up on our tables. What is at most risk of suffering from the drought condition?
Thank you for the question. It's a little early to tell. We're still tabulating the changes to what will be available to British Columbians. So that's a process, and we're still working on that. As far as recovery goes and long term, I can tell you that the reason why we have applied to the agri-recovery, to the federal government for agri-recovery, is so that we can replace those. But in the we're just not sure yet as to the impacts. And that goes for the cattle as well. So the ones that have been sent for early culling, we're not sure yet about those numbers. We do have a smaller percentage of those in the industry in comparison to, say, Alberta. So we're not quite there yet with respect to impacts, but we'll know more as the weeks progress.
Lisa, did you have a follow-up?
I just want to confirm. So it's fair to say that at this point, no food source has been adversely affected by the droughts?
At this point, I would say that likely we're looking at losses, yes, and so there will be impacts to local communities where the forest fires and the highest levels of drought are being seen. But as far as the bigger picture and impacts to British Columbia, I'm just not sure at this moment, because to be honest, we're not even halfway through yet. So it'll be difficult to actually determine at this point what we're looking at as far as damages.
For our next question, we're going to Wolf Debner, Black Press. Please go ahead.
To continue in that vein, if I heard you correctly, if I heard the Minister of Agriculture correctly, some culling has already taken place. And if current feedstocks are using feed that is reserved for the winter, and there are questions around how much food will be available in the winter, how high would you rate the likelihood that we will see significant culling in the future come later this year?
Before I pass it on to Minister Alexis, I just want to acknowledge how incredibly stressful of a time this is for farmers and ranchers right across the province, and how closely tied food security is to the impacts that we are seeing on in terms of climate change. We know that there is a direct connection between the extreme weather events that we are seeing here and its impact on food security for British Columbians and right across the country as well. And for those food producers, this is an incredibly stressful time. For many of these ranchers that are culling herds or selling off their herds, thinning them early, these are herds that they have cultivated for years, if not decades. And so we want them to know that we are aware of how serious the situation is and how focused we are on supporting them. And with that, Minister Alexis, I know that you'll likely have more information as well.
We absolutely recognize the need for hay and feed moving forward, because cattle that would normally have an area to graze in haven't got that available, and so they're being put into hay fields. So that means that second cut can't happen, and so that means they're into their winter stock to feed the cattle right now. And so that's what we're working on. We're working on that solution for fall and winter to replenish those stocks that the cattle are eating up right now. Thank you.
Wolf, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. This one is for Minister Ma. In your earlier remarks, you talked about the possibility of the drought continuing into next year, and I know you talked earlier that a technical briefing will be coming up. But what are the potential consequences from this drought condition extending into next year? Which consequences do you perhaps fear the most at this stage?
I think that the consequences of a long-term drought can be absolutely widespread. It is one of the reasons why I mentioned earlier that when communities are assessing the health of their reservoirs, they also have to understand the long-term consequences of actually drawing down their reservoirs below normal to where they would normally leave their reservoirs at the end of the dry season. If we do not get significant precipitation over the winter and into the spring, those reservoirs might not recharge the way that they normally expect them to. And that could mean, again, earlier drought conditions, another wildfire season that is what we've seen this year. It means earlier water restrictions. It can also mean impacts to the health of the streams and rivers downstream of those reservoirs and throughout the province as well. The impacts can be widespread. We are attempting to assess and understand what those long-term impacts are, but this is another reason why I am calling on communities to keep that in mind. If you have very healthy reservoirs right now and are relying on those healthy reservoirs to carry you into the winter, keep in mind that they may not recharge the way that you expect them over the winter if we don't get the precipitation that we need.
For our next question, we're going to Grace Giesbrecht, Fraser Valley Current. Please go ahead.
Hi, my question is for Minister Ma. The NDP previously criticized the commercial extraction of water by Nestle near Hope. With drought concerns like today's that we're talking about, has it or will it do anything to alter the arrangement that was criticized?
So everyone, including corporations, industries, people, communities, governments, we all need to be doing our part to mitigate the impacts of drought. Water bottling companies, like all other industrial water users, they must follow legislation, regulations, bylaws, and restrictions, including when and if they can extract water from resources. For water bottling companies that hold water licenses from the province directly, we have asked them to reduce their water use at this time. We're actively monitoring the conditions and won't hesitate to issue temporary protection orders to restrict water if necessary. I'm also mindful, however, that at this time, many communities are reliant on bottled water right now, whether they've been evacuation and don't have access to their usual water sources, or if their community has experienced an impact to their potable water. So I do want to acknowledge that bottled water is something that many communities are dependent on right now.
Grace, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I do. Just for the BC Wildfire Service, being as specific as you can you explain most frequent causes of the broad category of human-caused wildfires? I know that was mentioned earlier, and say what proportion are negligence and what are just from accidents or ongoing industrial activity or recreational activity?
Thank you for the question. I don't have that question about the number one cause of human-caused fires. It's category 2, generally speaking, which is backyard burning, fires that get away when the weather shifts for people who generally use fire as a tool within their property. And then, maybe it's a wind shift or the weather wasn't read very well for the next 24 hours. So that's the general cause. There are obviously a bunch of others that are kind of contained within the bucket of human-caused wildfires. And as Minister Ma mentioned in her opening, we have seen a reduced number of human-caused fires this fire season. Predominantly, we've been dealing with lightning-caused starts for the better part of the last month. And we really appreciate the public's diligence over the course of this fire season to not only report fires, but to ensure that they're not starting new ones as we continue to surge resources to our lightning-caused starts that are having an impact in your communities. So I think it's a really important year to thank the public for their diligence in this as we continue to battle seeing the thousands upon thousands of lightning strikes that we have. I think I'll end there unless there's a follow-up.
For our next question, we're going to Amanda Hosgood, the Tyee. Please go ahead.
Hi there. My question is around resources. I'm wondering what role the RCMP plays in wildfire response and if there's a chance that police could be called on to take a greater role.
Locally, RCMP do often work with local governments on evacuations. So I know that a lot of RCMP officers are often on the front lines in terms of going door to door to support evacuation efforts. Perhaps I'll also pass it off to Peter Brock. I'm sorry, Peter. I do know your name, Mr. Brock, to see if he has anything else that he can.
Yeah, Peter Brock, Executive Director for Provincial and Regional Operations. So we do utilize the RCMP and work very closely with the RCMP during, as Minister Ma had mentioned, during evacuations for fires that impact communities. We have a very close working relationship at the Emergency Operations Center and well connected with the RCMP, who deploy staff and move them around the province to support law enforcement activities. It's important to know that we certainly seek and look for the cooperation of all communities to really ensure that they're following the direction from their local authorities for evacuation orders and alerts. And certainly the RCMP play a very vital role in ensuring checkpoints and evacuations are supported as best they can and continue to be strong partners in that effort. Thank you.
Amanda, did you have a follow-up?
I do.
Follow-up.
I do. It's actually related to the question about human-caused wildfires. I'm wondering what the province is doing, or if the province is working with industry and specifically railway companies to ensure that all measures are being taken to make sure that industry isn't causing any wildfires.
Well, right now we do have fire bans right across the province, with campfires also banned across the province, including with the exception of Haida Gwaii. A lot of those open burns that Cliff was speaking to are Category 2 burns, which have been banned for quite some time now. Category 3 burns have also been banned. I don't know, Cliff, if you have anything else that you wanted to add on that.
And we work quite closely with the rail companies in BC ahead of the fire season. They have fire safety plans, which they execute, including the maintenance of the right-of-way for their rail lines. Obviously, it's a high-risk activity at times, depending on what they're doing on the railway. And so some of their activities are restricted given on what danger class we might be in the province. Right now, we're at a high danger class, and so a lot of those activities are actually restricted that would have a higher chance of leading to a fire. So we work very closely with the rail companies. In addition to that, we work quite closely with the forest licensees and forest industry, and they have been a significant support of our response effort this year. We have industry task teams. We're using a lot of their heavy equipment to put guards around fires. And obviously, they also are legislated, or their risk is based in legislation as well, in terms of when they can do high-risk activities and when they can't. And obviously, given the conditions in most parts of BC, their activities, high-risk activities, are restricted. With that, they're also very willing to come and support the response effort. And so we've been taking them up on that and bringing them into our response across the province.
We have time for one more question. Our final question today goes to Nick Sweetman, CHLY Radio. Please go ahead. LY Radio. Please go ahead.
Oh, hello. Thank you. Just a question for Mr. Ma. I'm just curious if all the carbon that's being released in these wildfires are going to be counted in BC's emissions calculations for 2023, and just maybe if you could speak about how that might affect BC's emission reduction targets.
I'm not quite the expert on carbon release counting, but from what I understand, you know what? Actually, instead of saying something that I'm pretty sure is right, but I'm not 100% sure about, let us follow up with you. We'll get somebody from the Ministry. We'll tap someone from the Ministry of Environment to provide you a more accurate response.
Nick, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I was also wondering, the federal government recently have the grocery rebate for consumers. I'm wondering, perhaps the effect on food availability and potentially prices, if the BC government is looking at anything similar.
Maybe elaborate on your question. I only caught part of it.
Sorry, I'm just saying that is the BC government considering programs similar to the federal grocery rebate for, to kind of mitigate the impact on prices that may be increasing on food at the grocery store?
Well, that's not information that I have for this particular briefing, but let me check with my colleagues and we'll see if there's anything that we can provide you on that.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you everyone for joining.